Long before Columbus came to America, there were people already living here. They lived in villages and on farms, and they grew corn. They were the Indians. There were large tribes of them, and two of those large tribes were the Cherokees and the Creeks. They lived in the south. And when the English and the Spanish came and settled along the coast, they brought something special with them. They brought horses. And it wasn't long before the Indians got some of those horses. Our story today is about a boy and his horse, a Cherokee boy named Groundhog. Groundhog's Horse by Joyce Rockwood. Groundhog named his horse Midnight, and he loved her more than anything else. He thought she was very special. He even braided her forelock and wove beads into it. But one night, Groundhog's horse was stolen. A group of Creek Indians crept into his village and took Midnight. And the next morning, when Groundhog awoke and discovered she was missing, he found out right away who had done it. The Creeks left a message behind so that everyone would know. Groundhog tried to get the older warriors of his village to go get his horse for him, but they said no, it wasn't worth starting a war with the Creeks over one horse. So Groundhog had to do it alone.
He looked up at the night sky. There was too much moonlight. A few clouds moved slowly, drifting beneath the stars. He would have to wait for one of them to cover the moon and darken things up a bit. So he squatted down and waited, watching the sky and worrying that dawn would arrive before he could get away. But at last a cloud came and moved across the moon, and everything was pitch black. "Here I come, Midnight," he whispered, as he rose and sprinted out across the open space, stooping low, running as lightly, as noiselessly as he could. The tasseled cornstalks, cool and dark, closed in around his head, and Groundhog ran on, leaving Frogtown behind. Coming out of the cornfield, Groundhog turned onto the path that ran south along the river. It was the path to Rabbit Town. That was all he knew. He had no idea how far he would have to go. Birdtown was the last Cherokee town before Creek Country. He would have to pass it, but then what? Would Rabbit Town be the first Creek town he came to, or the second, or the third? How would he know which town it was? Midnight would be there, Groundhog finally decided. That was how he would know. The cloud that had covered the moon had been joined by others. It was dark, too dark, with no moonlight on the path. As he trotted along in the darkness, Groundhog began to feel frightened. Who knew what was hiding in the blackness? Bears? Cougars? Creeks? There could be a Creek warrior behind every tree. A huge war party. Maybe they were watching him as he got farther and farther away from home. Maybe they're watching him, laughing to themselves because he was moving into their trap. Groundhog began to run faster, looking from one side to the other, straining to see into the darkness. Suddenly he heard a sound. Glancing back, he thought he saw a man stepping from the shadows. He gasped and ran harder, as fast as he could. A dark form stepped into his path. He crashed into the unmoving chest of a warrior. Strong arms grasped him, and he struggled, kicking and pulling, trying to get away. "Whoa, whoa," said the warrior. Groundhog felt the man's big hands feeling him up and down his arms and chest. "What is this?" asked the warrior. "A puny man or just a boy?" "A boy," gasped Groundhog. "What did you say?" "A boy." "You're speaking Cherokee." "So are you." The two arms relaxed their hold. In the darkness, a face leaned down and peered closely into his. "I'm a Cherokee like you are," said Groundhog in a rush of relief. "So it seems," said the warrior. "I'm sorry to scare you like that. We thought you were a Creek stumbling into our camp." As Groundhog wondered who he was, two other warriors stepped out of the darkness. "What are you doing out here in the dark at night, little brother?" one of the warriors asked. Well, Groundhog could barely see him, but he could tell by the way they talked that they were over-hill Cherokees from the other side of the mountains. "Well," Groundhog said, stalling for time as he tried to invent an answer. He was afraid they would take him home if he told the truth. "Are you lost?" asked the third warrior. "Yes," lied Groundhog. "I'm lost." "Well, how did that happen?" Were you traveling with your family?" "Yes, I was traveling with my family." "And you got separated?" "Yes. A Creek war party came." "Did your people get killed?" "No." Now Groundhog began to get tangled in his story. "Just separated. We all ran different ways. The Creeks chased me for a long time, but I finally lost them. I went back to find my family, but they were gone. I guess they went on home." "Probably thought you'd been captured," said one of the warriors. "Maybe." "Well, you must be from Birdtown. You're headed in that direction." "Yes, from Birdtown." "But I thought you said you were lost." "Well, I mean, in a way I'm lost, but I know where I am. What I mean to say is I'm lost from my family." "Well, we'll take you home in our dugout canoe. It'll save you a lot of walking. We're camping here till the sun rises, and it ought to be coming up any time now."
Groundhog was lucky that those were Cherokee warriors. If they had been Creek warriors, he would have been in deep trouble. And they didn't believe his story one bit. They finally got him to tell the truth. And when he did, they told him what he was trying to do was very dangerous. However, they would take him with them in their canoe down the river. Not only that, they would take him right to the Creek village. They instructed him to go through the woods and hide behind the village. And when he decided to steal his horse, if anyone chased close behind, not to try to go back upriver, but to head straight north into the mountains, a very dangerous territory, but the safest way to get away. So trying to remember everything that the Cherokee warriors told him, Groundhog went through the woods and came up behind the Creek village. There he found a tree where he could hide and look over the cornfield into the village and watch until it got dark. He was waiting for just the right minute to make his move.
Groundhog climbed down from his lookout tree and poked around until he found a nice dry hickory log. The bark was loose but not rotten. He broke off a piece. Moving into a spot of moonlight, he took out his knife and began carving a picture message on the smooth inner side of the bark. He could not see very well, and his hands were sweaty and a little shaky. But even under the best of conditions, he was not a good artist. He hoped the Creeks would be able to read his scratchings and understand that a Cherokee warrior from Frogtown had stolen midnight while all the town slept, including the dogs. The message tablet made Groundhog feel better. Looking at it gave him courage. He would stick it in a crack in the wall plaster near the very spot midnight was tied. With bravery fluttering faintly in his heart, Groundhog got to his feet. It was time to make the attack. Without a sound, Groundhog moved from tree to tree, staying in the shadow of the forest's edge. Since he was a tiny boy, he had been practicing this, and now that the time had come to be a warrior, he was able to move softly, smoothly, like the rustle of a summer breeze. He came to the place where the stream entered the clearing, and he stood quietly, almost without breathing, looking toward the town. Ahead was a moonlit rooftop. Midnight. Midnight, the joy of his life was tied to that house. Groundhog took a trembling step toward the cornfield. Feeling his bravery leaving him, he fingered the message tablet stuck in his belt. No courage came flowing from it. He took another step, and another. "Don't stop now," he told himself. Crouching low, he entered the cornfield. The corn swayed and shook, rustling loudly. He stopped, and then started again, more slowly. It felt almost natural to be creeping through a cornfield, like playing a war game with Jumper. Jumper could never find him in a cornfield. It helped to think of it as a game, and he began to feel calmer. He had done this so many times before. But then the cornfield ended, and Groundhog found himself staring at the enemy town. It was so close. Blood was pounding in his head, and his breath came quick and light with fear. The patch of moonlight stretched before him, open space, no cover, and beyond it lay the house. He could see the passageway between the house and the garden. That was where he had to go. Then around to the front, quietly, without waking any dogs. The thought of it made him want to turn back. Don't think, he told himself. He stepped out into the moonlight. His mind spun, blurring, and then it stilled and sharpened, and everything seemed clear and crisp. It was like a dream with no sounds. He could barely feel his feet touch the ground, and nothing seemed real as he moved silently through the moonlight. He reached the back of the house without making a sound. He passed through the narrow yard between the house and the garden, all going smoothly, and he slipped around the corner. There before him was midnight, black and beautiful, dozing in the moonlight. "It's me, girl," Groundhog whispered in his softest voice, not wanting to rush up and startle her. He reached for her rope, and she jerked her head around and looked at him. Recognizing him, she nickered. Groundhog froze in terror. The nickering rang in his ears, loud as thunder it had seemed, though actually it had been quite soft. A little boy's head popped out of the door of the house, and Groundhog moved with a jolt. He slashed at the rope, cutting it. Grabbing his carved message from his belt, he threw it at the boy. And the next thing he knew, he was running into the cover of the cornfield, gripping Midnight's rope, dragging her after him. "Wait!" yelled the little boy. All over Rabbit Town, dogs began to bark. Groundhog could hear the voices of warriors waking up, rushing out of their houses. He tried to stop and jump on the Midnight's back, but he was too weak with fear. He kept running, stumbling toward the trees. "Wait!" the little boy shouted, chasing after him. "Wait!" Groundhog ran faster, out of the cornfield and into the forest, pulling Midnight along. As he leaped over a fallen tree, the rope jerked out of his hand, caught in the branches. He reached for his knife to cut it free, but his knife was gone. He'd lost it. "Will you wait?" demanded the little boy, rushing up out of the darkness. Groundhog tugged at the rope. "Get out of here, kid. Don't make me hurt you." The little boy reached for the rope, and together they wrenched it free. "This way," the boy said. He grabbed the rope away from Groundhog and ran toward the stream. "What?" said Groundhog. "Come on," the little boy said. "They'll find us." "Us? What do you mean, us? I'm a Cherokee. I just raided you." "Be quiet," hissed the boy, and plunged into the water knee-deep, heading upstream away from the river. "No, you don't," said Groundhog. "Give me my horse. I'm not going back to your town." "It's not my town," whispered the little boy. "What are you talking about?" said Groundhog. "I'm not a Creek," said the boy. "I'm a Cherokee, a captured Cherokee. I'm going back with you." Well, Groundhog saw his plan in ruins. "No, you're not. I came for my horse, and that's all. If I drag along a little kid, they'll catch me." "Well, they'll catch you anyway if you don't come with me. I know where to hide. I've planned this out 100 times. He had jumped on the Midnight's back and was reaching down a hand to Groundhog. "This is crazy," muttered Groundhog, waving his hand away. But not too far behind, he heard the shouts of warriors. Without another word, he jumped up behind the boy, sprawling belly first across Midnight's rump. As he pulled himself into a sitting position, Midnight kept a steady pace upstream, her tracks hidden in the flowing water. "They won't look for us this way. It's the opposite way from Cherokee country. They'll head for the river trail instead." The two boys rode on in silence. The town noises faded behind them until all they could hear was the soft, wet clopping of Midnight's hooves on the rocky creek bottom and the sounds of darkness, frogs and locusts and night breezes.
It was very important to Groundhog to leave that message so that the Creeks would know that a Cherokee boy was brave enough to come to their village and take back his horse. Of course, he didn't know he was going to have to also be brave enough to take a kid along with him, too. And what's more, with the warriors right behind them, they're going to have to go through the mountains. Now, Groundhog's father had told him about all kinds of terrible and mysterious things that happened in the mountains. I'll let you read what happens next. Groundhog's Horse by Joyce Rockwood.